All right, so here is the video for the Rogerian model of argument, the Rogerian form. This was developed by Carl Rogers. He ran the American Psychological Association, I believe, for a good long time, and he is known for producing this. This is a model of argument we use, or model of rhetoric that we use that is based on a clinical counseling method. It desires to incite compassion and reconciliation between parties. Now, the important thing to note here is that doesn't mean, even though sometimes this is used for negotiation and it helps to find a middle ground, it isn't a full compromise model. It's not fine, I'm just going to acquiesce or submit to or subject myself to other people's false thinking if I believe them to be false. What it does do is it's a form of rhetoric that helps you establish ethos over logos. The classical Greek oratorical that we talked about a moment ago, or in the other video, is about establishing logos, using logical arguments to win. This is about establishing ethos that's the value embedded in the structure, that I earn my right to speak by showing I'm credible and knowledgeable and understanding. So it emphasizes compassion, thinking about the other person's side of things, not just for why they're wrong. In fact, as we'll walk through it and we'll talk a little more about this. So some of the structure may seem familiar. We have an introduction to the issue, the problem, or the argument. We're still trying to get our readers' attention. We're still trying to introduce the basic thing that we're trying to address, topic or whatnot, topic, challenge, problem, issue. Then we provide context. That sounds familiar. Then here's where we start deviating from structure, the previous structure. We want to take time to validate alternate views. And as you notice, this is before I state my own opinion or make my own argument or talk about where I stand. It's saying I hear this person, they believe this, giving context. I find value in this part of their argument. Even if I don't agree with this other part of their argument, I might say that later. But I find value. Validating is, what value do you see? What is the potential value? It's not the same as agreeing with or affirming necessarily. It can be, but it's not. Those are three different levels to this. Validate says, I see that there is some value here. I want to acknowledge the value I see. And this is very counterculture in many ways to traditional forms of argument, which is trying to win and shut other people down. And it's also the counter to a lot of logical fallacies like ad hominem, where the point is not to see value, but to challenge the other person. So we validate alternate views, then we state our own opinions and develop those. So this still links to confirmatio and the other structure, but it's happening in a different place. But the same types of things happen. These are body paragraphs that are meant to say, here's what I think, and here's the evidence for why I think it. And then I'm going to explain my benefits, explain the benefits of my perspective to people who might disagree with me. So on the surface, some of those things don't really seem that different. The difference is with traditional Rogerian model, these are all equal parts. That means that your introduction is 20%. Giving context is 20%. Validating alternate views might be 10 or 20%. Stating one's opinion maybe 20 or 30%. Explaining benefits maybe 20%. And then you still have the conclusion as part of that. So balancing this form of rhetoric, having each of these pieces, what that means is it could be halfway through your essay before you really drive home your main argument, because you're spending time developing credibility, saying, I hear you, I understand that this is a problem, here's what I see people saying about this problem and the issues that come up as we try and address this problem. I hear this person, when they say this, I understand that, and I agree with this part of it. I validate the part I can. I say, I get how seeing it that way provides this insight or this thing that's meaningful. And I go through that for each of the people who might be in opposition to where I'm going to go. I try and say, look, I hear you. I value this part of what you're saying. And then eventually I get to the point where I say, nevertheless, I still hold this value. I still hold this belief. I still think we should follow this trajectory or take this path, even though I understand where you're coming from. Now, what that does is it sets a baseline that understanding and compassion and being a human are more important than winning the argument. You want to acknowledge and understand, and that develops your credibility. It earns you the right to speak. There's a lot of people nowadays who think that it is their right to speak because of the First Amendment. And so they'll just shout, they'll just spurt out their opinion. You'll see it all over Facebook, whether they have evidence for it or not. And it's one thing, it's kind of the difference between, I think, and I'll talk more about this with the sociocultural, but it's the difference between authority and influence. Some people who have authority, they have authority because it's on paper, they're the boss, they're the authority, they have this thing that documents their right to do something a certain way because of the position they hold. Other people have influence. You earn influence. You might earn authority, but your position gives you authority. When you earn influence, it doesn't matter what position you have, because people respect you, they will listen. You have established a culture of respect around you that leads people to listen to what you have to say. Because of this. So this ethos, this credibility falls into that influence category. It's people we allow to have influence or authority over us versus people who were kind of forced to have influence or authority over us. And again, ties to a sociocultural principle on authority we'll talk about later. But with this Rogerian form, if I give compassion, if I show compassion, if I show that I'm trying to understand the other perspective, that changes the way people respond to me. And I'll do a couple applications. I've got a couple stories where I'll give examples in other videos at another time. One dealing with Nathan and David from the Old Testament, because I just think it's fun. And that kind of talks about the impact of storytelling as a way to give context, as a way to build compassion and as a starting place before you get to your main argument. We'll talk about that another time. But introduce the problem, give context, show that you understand the meaningful pieces. This is where analysis, stakeholder mapping, all the